Hi, folks. Welcome to Crisco's Corner. Hi, folks. Welcome back. And those of you that are new, welcome. Well, we have a flurry of Supreme Court rulings, and one is particularly important here. Justice Thomas blasts Justice Jackson's race-infused worldview in Supreme Court ruling outlawing affirmative action. I agree. Racism to supposedly set certain individuals higher than others based on past or even current discrimination is racism. This screams, they say, well, many minority black students are trapped in failing schools, rundown neighborhoods, don't have the resources that the richer school districts or the white kids and the Asian kids, and they're talking about Indian Asians as well as other Asians. Is it fair? It screams for school choice. It's a box that the National Education Association and the teachers' unions have put around these kids in areas for years. Give vouchers to parents in inner cities so they can go to better schools. They're forced to go to the crap school that they belong to. That is the underlying problem. That goes against their best interest, because then it proves, because many of these schools are privately held or privately owned, or they're parochial schools we used to call when we used to have Catholic schools. I live in upstate New York. They're called parochial schools. They do a much better job for less money. A lot less money, but they're barred from doing that. I applaud this. This is great. Now, they'll find a way around it. As you'll see, Harvard is saying, well, we're going to allow now minorities, and they get to determine what a minority is. And Asian American isn't a minority anymore because they're too successful in this country. Well, if we've got so much racism, how are these Asians that are much darker skinned than white people being so successful in academia and in business and in everything else? Things that make you wonder, because they're not stuck in failing schools. Let's read on. Justice Brown Jackson called the court's decision outlawing affirmative action a tragedy with ostrich-like logic. Yeah. Typical progressive lefty. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who is, I'll tell you, is an amazing. You should see there's a documentary on his life. That's when you say you came from nothing, he came from less than nothing. He was living in a side of town where the sanitation was a ditch that ran down the middle of the road that everybody went in. That was their sewage treatment. That's nothing. Dismantled his colleague Brown Jackson's faith-infused worldview as part of the Supreme Court's decision Thursday to outlaw race considerations, also known as affirmative action, in the college admissions process. Thomas, the second black justice on the bench, sided with a 6-3 majority ruling Thursday that the court's decision sees the university admission policies for what they are: ruthless, race-based preferences designed to ensure a racial mix in their entering classes. That is racial quotas. That is racism. It's the new version of racism from the Democrats. The old version of racism from the Democrats was the old Jim Crow laws. Remember the old separate but equal? This is just a different modern twist on the same thing. Tell you a funny story. I used to be a manager inside Kmart in the late 70s through the mid 80s. I worked for a shoe company that was not part of Kmart. And they have what they call an EEOC code, Equal Opportunity Employment Code, that tells you what your race is: male, female, Hispanic, white, black, the whole list. And when I was hired, I was put down as a Spanish American female accidentally. And I worked there for 9 years. About the 5th or 6th year, my district manager came to me and he was laughing. And he said, well, I see why they're never going to fire you. I said, what are you talking about? And he laughed. They had me down as a Spanish-American female. They ended up changing it. But that's the funny part. Even back then, the late 70s, early 80s, these EEOC codes were about counting people by race. It's wrong. Thomas said that Justice Jackson's race-infused worldview falls flat at each step, and I agree. I'm going to go through several articles here. This video is going to be a little bit longer, but please bear with me because this is hugely important. Individuals are the sum of their unique experiences, challenges, and accomplishments. What matters is not the barriers they face, but how they choose to confront them. And their race is not to blame for everything good or bad that happens in their lives. Thomas wrote a concurring opinion to offer an originalist defense of the colorblind Constitution to clarify that all forms of discrimination based on race, including so-called affirmative action, were prohibited under the Constitution, and to emphasize the pernicious effects of all such discrimination. You know, it's amazing to me. Amazing. Though Justice Thomas seems to think that a race-based theory can somehow benefit everyone, it is a mutable fact that every time the government uses race criteria to bring the races together, someone gets excluded, and the person is excluded suffering an injury solely because of his or her race. Yes, absolutely. You're going to screw over somebody because certain racism and discrimination is going on either in the distant past or the very tiny present. When I say tiny present, I mean very seldom. It's unfair. What about the poor white kid from Appalachia, we'll say, that lives in this little small town, even here in upstate New York, in a little town where all the manufacturing has been wiped out. Poverty is everywhere in these small towns, and it's getting worse. What are they up against? They're up against the same things as the inner city black kids, but yet they're excluded. So Harvard is going to get around it by saying, we're going to make you do an essay now of the struggles you had because of your race. Justice Jackson seems to have no response or explanation at all for people who will shoulder that burden. However, for example, would Justice Jackson explain the need for race-based preferences to the Chinese student who has worked hard his whole life, only to be denied college admission in part because of his skin color? That is an excellent question. Let's cover another article. The Constitution prevails, Justice Clarence Thomas declares, while Justice Sotomayor says race continues to matter. I don't mean to be rude or try to belittle people. I try to be as even-handed as I can, especially on the Supreme Court. But Sotomayor sometimes, it's just a dim bulb. I'm sorry, she is. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and Sonia Moyer read the conflicting opinions on affirmative action. That's very rare. Very rare. Oh, gosh. Today, despite a lengthy interregnum, the Constitution prevails, Thomas declared in his opinion. The 75-year-old justice lauded Thursday's majority opinion, overturning decades of U.S. judicial system allowing college universities to admit or reject applicants based on their race, but also offered his own individual input. I write separately to offer an originalist defense of the colorblind Constitution to explain further the flaws of the court's greater jurisprudence, to clarify that all forms of discrimination based on race, including so-called affirmative action, are prohibited under the Constitution, and emphasize the pernicious effects of all such discrimination. Picking people by race, racism, to say that we're making up for past racism, using racism to fight racism, it's always, always, always wrong. Now let's take a look on Twitter. It's from Tim Pool, and there'll be others here. New loopholes for racists. This is a tweet from Harvard University, one of the colleges in the suit. My understanding, University of North Carolina was the other. And it says they'll go along. We will certainly comply with the court's decision. But what they've said to us, yeah, we're going to go along with it technically, but now we're going to have essays done. by individuals showing the struggles they've had because of their race. They're just saying to the court, they're flipping them the finger, and they're saying, we don't care what you think. We're going to do it anyway. We're just going to call it something else. And I love this. Just a guy in Texas. How dare the Supreme Court take away our right to discriminate against other overachieving Asians and white people? We here at Harvard, we don't care about your academic achievements. We care about the color of your skin and our ability to use that to virtue signal to our friends and colleagues and our exclusive parties and events. So send us your sob stories and essays so we continue our mission of indoctrinating future generations and rewriting our history one unqualified admission at a time. Your lack of self-worth is imperative to our success. That's pretty bad, but she's pretty accurate. Have you considered that they care more about people who have achieved what they did through adversity and effort rather than a school filled with rich students who got accepted because their parents could send them the best schools and programs? Well, Mr. Mike, this is an cry out for school choice. I noticed, I'll bet you money, I would bet $100 right now if you ask this individual, do you believe in school choice? He would say no. So they're trapped in this system that promotes failure. So if I have no money and I'm Caucasian, can I write a story of my struggles? Yeah, absolutely. But it won't matter. You can, but they'll probably just shred your application as soon as they read you're Caucasian. Yeah. Unbelievable. It's amazing to me. Cope. The world isn't going backwards. Yeah, it's just incredibly amazing to me. So let's get back to the story. We get some more quotes. This is from Senator Josh Hawley. Powerful words from Justice Thomas today in the landmark case bearing racial discrimination by colleges. I want this highlighted paragraph. I want you to read it multiple times. Pause the video and think about exactly what Justice Thomas said. He said, accordingly, Justice Jackson's race-infused worldview falls flat at each step. Individuals are the sum of their unique experiences, challenges, and accomplishments. What matters is not the barriers they face, but how they choose to confront them. And the race is not to blame for everything, good or bad. Maybe some things, I'm not going to lie, but not the vast majority. That happens in their lives. A contrary myopic worldview based on individual skin color to the total exclusion of their personal choices is nothing short of race determinism. And there you have it. Byron Donalds, who's a firebrand, he's also black. I believe he's a House of Representatives congressional member from Florida, Republican. Today's ruling is a massive win against the left's equity agenda that seems to achieve equality through equal outcomes, not equal access. There was clearly a time when affirmative action was needed to end racial discrimination, but that time is over. When people say equity in the company you work for, or in political conversations, or in speeches you see, or essays, or videos, or whatever it is, equity is discrimination. Plain and simple. Equality and equity are polar opposites. Do not let the progressive leftists use them interchangeably. It's a con and it's a lie. And most of them know it. The dumb ones don't, but the vast majority of them know. I'll leave you with this. The state of California, I believe it was last year or the year before, basically has a civil rights law that's pretty much modeled on the 1960s civil rights laws that passed through the federal government about discrimination and all the things involved in it. They put it up for referendum to get rid of it, to take away that law. Well, you say to yourself, that makes no sense. Why would they do that? They needed to get rid of that law because they want quotas on boards of companies, CEOs, and all kinds of other things they were going to instill equity in. i.e., if there's 12 board members on your corporation, 6 of them have to be women, certain number have to be Asian, certain number have to be black, certain number have to be gay, certain number have to be trans, and so on and so on. And with the California law in place, they couldn't do that. So that's why they wanted the law revoked. But even in California, in that nutbar world, the voters said, no, we're not doing that. That's how bad these people are. They lie and say it's about equality, but it's about equity, which is quotas. It's incredible to me how they get away with it and how many tens of millions of people just go along like sheep. It's a great ruling by the court. We'll see how the colleges handle it. I'm sure they'll get around it somehow, and it'll take 2 or 3 years before it gets to the court again. And so we continue to fight the fight. I applaud it. I think it's awesome. Take away discrimination from college admissions. Who the hell could possibly be against that? And until next time, goodbye and good luck.